The old veteran sat in a chair that was too soft for his liking. Kethralvus had spent his youth sleeping on rocks and frozen ground. He did not trust soft things anymore. Soft things made you weak. Soft things made you forget. The young archivist across from him was barely older than a hatchling. She held a recording device in her small hands and looked at him with eyes full of respect. She did not know. She could not know. She had been born 30 years after the war ended. To her, humans were friends, trading partners. The strange soft creatures who told funny jokes and made excellent music. She did not know what they really were. "Shield Captain Voss," she said, using his old military title. "Thank you for agreeing to this interview. The Memorial Archive is honored to record your experiences." Kethril clicked his mandibles. It was a sound his species made when they were uncomfortable. He had been making that sound for 47 years now, ever since he first set foot on that cursed human colony world. "I am not sure honored is the right word," he said. His voice was rough like gravel. Age had not been kind to him, but then again, neither had the war. "I am not sure I want to remember." The archivist leaned forward. "The younger generation needs to understand, sir. They need to know what happened, what the humans were capable of." Kethril almost laughed. Almost, but laughing hurt these days, and besides, there was nothing funny about any of it. "What the humans were capable of," he repeated. "Yes, I suppose that is one way to say it." He looked down at his 4 arms. 2 of them still worked properly. The other 2 had been rebuilt with mechanical parts after a human explosive had torn them apart. The doctors had done good work. Most days, he could not tell the difference. But on cold nights, when the weather turned bad, he felt the ghost of that pain all over again. "I was young when the war started," he began. "Younger than you. I had just earned my rank, shield captain. It was the proudest moment of my life. My father had been a shield captain. His father before him. We were warriors. It was in our blood." He paused, remembering. The memories were sharp even after all these years. They cut like broken glass. When we first detected the human signals, we thought nothing of them. They were primitives. They lived short lives. 80 years, maybe 90 if they were lucky. We lived for 300. We had conquered 100 worlds. We had never lost a war. The idea of losing to creatures who died before they could even reach maturity seemed absurd. The archivist nodded, writing notes. Kethril wondered if she truly understood. Probably not. Understanding required experience. Experience required pain. High Command decided to annex their territory. It was supposed to be simple. A small species. A few colonies. One unremarkable home world. We estimated the campaign would last 3 months. We would add their worlds to the hegemony, integrate their population, and move on to more important matters. He stopped. His mandibles clicked again, faster this time. We were fools. The archivist waited. She was patient. That was good. This story required patience. My battalion was assigned to a world called New Saskatchewan, a farming colony, mostly agricultural. The intelligence report said the population was approximately 200,000. Farmers, teachers, merchants, no standing army. Only a small local militia armed with primitive projectile weapons. Kethril closed his eyes. He could still see the transport ships descending through the atmosphere. He could still feel the excitement in his chest. His first real command. His first real conquest. We expected them to surrender. That is what civilized species do when faced with overwhelming force. They calculate the odds. They recognize the futility of resistance. They submit. It is logical. It is reasonable. It is sane. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the archivist. The humans were not sane. A sound from the corridor made him stop. Footsteps. Soft footsteps. Human footsteps. He knew that sound. He would know it anywhere. It was burned into his brain like a scar. A figure passed by the doorway. A human female. She wore the formal robes of a diplomat. Her hair was gray with age. Her face was lined with wrinkles. She looked kind, gentle, harmless. Catherall felt his heart begin to race. Both of them, beating fast and hard against his chest. His hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly that the wood creaked. The archivist noticed. "Sir, are you all right?" He did not answer immediately. He could not. His throat had closed up. His body had gone rigid. Every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to run, to hide, to get away from that creature before she noticed him. The diplomat walked past without looking in. Her footsteps faded down the corridor. Catherall slowly released his grip on the chair. He forced himself to breathe. 47 years, he said quietly. 47 years since the war ended. I still cannot see one of them without wanting to flee. The archivist looked troubled. But sir, humans are our allies now. They have been for decades. They are no threat to us. Catherall made a sound that might have been a laugh in another life. Now it just sounded hollow and sad. No threat, he repeated. Yes, that is what they want you to believe. That is what they want everyone to believe. And most of the time, it is even true. Most of the time, they are exactly what they appear to be. Friendly, curious, helpful, kind. He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. But I have seen what lies beneath that kindness. I have seen what they become when you threaten what they love. I have watched them do things that would make our worst criminals weep with horror. And the most terrifying part? When it was over, when the blood had dried and the fires had gone out, they went right back to being kind again. Like nothing had happened. Like it was just another day. The archivist had stopped writing. She was staring at him with wide eyes. What happened on New Saskatchewan? She asked. Catherall settled back in his chair. His mechanical arms whirred softly as he adjusted his position. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was turning orange and purple, beautiful colors that reminded him of fire and bruises. Everything, he said, everything happened on New Saskatchewan. That is where we learned the truth about humanity. That is where the mighty Torvan hegemony broke against a bunch of farmers with hunting rifles and homemade bombs. He clicked his mandibles one more time. That is where I learned to be afraid. The transport ships touched down at dawn. Catherall remembered the way the morning light looked on that alien world. Golden, warm. The fields stretched out in every direction, filled with crops he did not recognize. It looked peaceful. It looked harmless, thought it looked like a lie. His battalion numbered 800 warriors. The finest soldiers the hegemony had ever produced. They wore powered armor that could stop most weapons. They carried plasma rifles that could cut through steel. They had air support. They had orbital bombardment capability. They had everything. The humans had farming equipment and anger. The settlement was called Millbrook Valley, Catherall told the archivist. Population approximately 12,000. We surrounded it within an hour. Standard procedure. Cut off escape routes. Establish a perimeter. Then broadcast surrender demands and wait. He paused, remembering the silence that followed that first broadcast. No response. No white flags. No desperate pleas for mercy. Just silence. We thought perhaps our translation software was broken. We thought maybe they had not understood. So we broadcast again. And again, nothing. The archivist frowned. They did not respond at all? Oh, they responded, Catherall said. Eventually. A single message. Short. Simple. He closed his eyes, reciting the words from memory. Come and take it. That message had confused High Command. What did it mean? Was it a challenge? A bluff? A mistranslation? They spent 2 hours debating. Meanwhile, the humans were preparing. I gave the order to advance at midday. We moved in formation. Professional. Disciplined. We had done this 100 times before on 100 different worlds. It was routine. His voice grew quiet. The first explosion killed 30 of my soldiers. A human had buried himself in a hole in the ground. Just a hole, covered with cloth and dirt. He had waited there for hours, not moving, barely breathing. When the Torvan column passed over him, he detonated the explosives strapped to his chest. He was smiling, Kethril said. I saw his face for just a moment before the blast. He was smiling like a child at a celebration. He was happy to die as long as he could take some of us with him. That was the first lesson the Torvan learned about humans. They did not value their own lives the way other species did. Death was not something to be avoided. It was just another tool to be used. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of horror that Kethril would never forget. The humans fought from every building, every ditch, every shadow. They set traps everywhere. They poisoned the water supply. They put sharp metal pieces under the dirt where the Torvan walked. They rigged dead bodies to explode. There was a woman, Kethril said. Elena Kowalski. I learned her name later from the human records we captured. She was 62 years old. A grandmother. She had lived in Millbrook Valley her whole life. She grew vegetables. She baked bread. She taught children to read. He stopped. The memory was painful, even now. She destroyed one of our heavy walkers. The walker was a war machine that stood 20 meters tall. It had armor that could withstand direct hits from artillery. It had weapons that could level a city block. It was worth more than most starships. Elena Kowalski drove a grain harvester into its legs at full speed. The impact knocked the walker off balance. Then she detonated the harvester's fuel cell. The explosion killed her instantly, Kethril said. It also killed the walker's entire crew. 7 of my best soldiers, gone, because a grandmother decided she would rather die than let us take her town. They found a note in the wreckage. Elena had written it before the attack and tucked it into her pocket. The translators worked on it for hours because they could not believe the message was correct. It said, "You are not taking my grandchildren's home." The archivist was silent. Her recording device hummed softly in the quiet room. That was not even the worst of it, Kethril continued. That was just one woman. There were thousands like her. Old men who had never held a weapon suddenly became snipers. Children carried messages through tunnels we did not know existed. The wounded refused medical treatment so they could keep fighting. The dying spent their last breaths telling us exactly what they thought of us. He made that hollow laughing sound again. Do you know what the humans called that militia? The Millbrook Valley Volunteer Defense Force? Volunteers. They were not soldiers. They were not trained warriors. They were farmers and shopkeepers and teachers who decided, on their own, to fight an enemy that outnumbered them and outgunned them in every way. By the end of the 3rd day, the Torvan had taken Millbrook Valley. But it was not a victory. It could not be called a victory. 800 soldiers had entered that town. 412 walked out. The rest were dead or too wounded to move. We killed thousands of them, Kethril admitted. For every one of us that fell, we killed 5 or 6 of them. By any normal measure, we should have felt triumphant. We had won. We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior everything. He looked at the archivist with eyes that had seen too much. But when the sun rose on the 4th day, when we stood in the ruins of that little farming town, Surrounded by the bodies of farmers and grandmothers and children, we did not feel like victors. We felt like we had barely survived. We felt like we had escaped something terrible by the narrowest of margins. The archivist finally spoke. What happened next? We reported back to High Command. We told them what had happened. We warned them that the humans were not what we expected, that they would not surrender, that they would fight to the last being, the last breath, the last heartbeat. Kethral's mandibles clicked slowly. High Command did not believe us. They thought we were exaggerating. They thought we had simply been unlucky. They sent more troops, more ships, more weapons. They were certain that with enough force, the humans would break. He shook his head slowly. They never broke. Not once, not ever. For 2 years, we threw everything we had at them. And every single time, they threw it right back in our faces. With interest. The old veteran fell silent for a moment, lost in memories of fire and blood and the sound of human laughter echoing from burning buildings. Millbrook Valley was just the beginning. The humans learned from every battle. They got better, faster, more creative, more ruthless. And we learned too. We learned that we had started a war we could not win. Not because we were weaker than them, but because we were not willing to pay the price that victory would require. He met the archivist's eyes. The humans were. 3 months into the war, Kethro stopped sleeping properly. He would close his eyes and see human faces. Smiling faces. Laughing faces. Faces twisted with hate and determination. Faces of the dead who refused to stay dead in his dreams. He was not alone. Half his surviving soldiers had the same problem. The medical officers called it combat fatigue. Kethro called it something else. He called it understanding. By the 3rd month, we knew we were in trouble, he told the archivist. The war was supposed to be over by then. Instead, it was just getting started. We controlled the cities, but we did not control the countryside. We held the buildings, but we did not hold the people. Every night, something exploded. Every day, someone died. The humans had adapted. They stopped fighting in large groups where Torvan technology could destroy them easily. Instead, they fought in small teams. 2 or 3 humans here. 4 or 5 there. They hit supply lines. They ambushed patrols. They disappeared into the forests and farms like ghosts. They called it guerrilla warfare, Kethral said. An old human strategy. Very old. They had been fighting each other with these tactics for thousands of years. We had never seen anything like it. We did not know how to respond. The archivist looked confused. Fighting each other? You mean humans fought wars among themselves? Kethral nodded slowly. That was perhaps the most disturbing thing we learned about them. Humans did not need an external enemy to practice war. They had been killing each other since before they learned to write. War was in their blood. It was part of their culture. They had spent their entire existence perfecting the art of destruction. He shifted in his chair, his mechanical arms whirring. We thought we were warriors. We were children playing with toys. The humans were the real thing. The psychological warfare was the worst part. The Torvan were not prepared for it. They did not understand why the humans did the things they did. They would capture our communication frequencies, Kethral explained. Then they would broadcast messages. Sometimes it was the final transmissions of our fallen soldiers. The screams, the pleas for help, the last words of dying warriors. They would play these recordings on repeat all night long, so we could not sleep. The archivist looked horrified. That is cruel. Yes, Kethral agreed. It was, and it worked. Our morale collapsed. Soldiers who had been brave and proud became nervous and afraid. Every shadow held a threat. Every silence was suspicious. We started making mistakes. Stupid mistakes. Fatal mistakes. But that was not the worst of it. The worst was what the humans did with their own dead. In our culture, we honor our fallen warriors, Kethril said. We retrieve their bodies at any cost. We bring them home. We give them proper ceremonies. It is sacred. It is the foundation of our warrior code. He paused. This part was still hard to talk about, even after all these years. The humans knew this. They studied us. They learned our customs. And then they used those customs against us. The first time it happened, Kethril lost 12 soldiers. A squad had found a fallen Torvan warrior in a destroyed building. They moved in to retrieve the body, as their code demanded. The body exploded. They had booby-trapped their own dead, Kethril said. Not our dead. Their own. They placed explosives inside the corpses of their fallen soldiers, knowing that we would try to recover them. They turned our honor into a weapon against us. The archivist set down her recording device. Her hands were shaking. How could anyone do such a thing? Desecrating their own dead? Kethril made that hollow sound again. That is the question that haunted us. That is the question that kept us awake at night. We could not understand it. We could not comprehend a species that would treat their own fallen with such disrespect. He leaned forward. But then we realized the truth. It was not disrespect. It was love. They loved their families, their homes, their way of life so much that they were willing to do anything to protect them. They would sacrifice their bodies, their honor, their very souls if it meant keeping their people safe. That realization changed everything. The Torvan had always believed that honor and rules made war civilized. The humans did not care about civilized war. They cared about winning. They cared about survival. Everything else was negotiable. High Command finally understood what we were facing, Kethril said. They gathered all the generals and admirals together. They looked at the casualty reports. They calculated the cost of continuing the war. And they created something new. Something we had never needed before. The archivist picked up her recording device again. What did they create? The doctrine of unacceptable cost. It was a formal military document. Very official. Very proper. It said, in precise military language, that the conquest of human space was no longer a strategic priority. It said that the resources required to achieve victory would exceed any possible benefit. It said that the hegemony would seek a negotiated settlement. In simple terms, Kethril said, it was an admission of defeat. We could not say we had lost. That would have been too shameful. So we said the price was too high. We said we had chosen not to win. He clicked his mandibles. But everyone knew the truth. We had started a war with a species that was willing to go further than us. We had attacked people who valued their freedom more than their lives. And we had lost. The humans knew it too. They could have demanded harsh terms. They could have humiliated the hegemony. They could have pushed for revenge. They did not. That was perhaps the strangest part, Kethril admitted. When the war ended, the humans were gracious in victory. They asked for reasonable terms. They wanted peace. They wanted to trade. They wanted to be friends. He shook his head slowly. And that is what haunts me most of all. The same species that booby-trapped their own dead, that fought with such terrible fury, that refused to surrender even when all hope was gone. That same species turned around and offered us friendship like nothing had happened. The old veterans stared at the wall, seeing something far away. They could switch it on and off. The violence, the mercy, the hate, the kindness. It was all inside them, all at once, and they could choose which face to show the world. That is what makes them so terrifying. They are not monsters. Monsters would be easier to understand. He looked back at the alchemist. They are just humans. And that is far, far worse. Kethrol was captured on the 347th day of the war. He remembered the exact number because he had been counting. Every night, before he tried to sleep, he would add another mark to his personal record. Another day survived. Another day closer to either victory or death. We were escorting a supply convoy through contested territory, he told the alchemist. Standard mission. We had done it dozens of times before. But the humans had been watching. They knew our routes. They knew our schedules. They were patient. The ambush was perfect. Explosions disabled the lead and rear vehicles, trapping the convoy in a narrow valley. Then the shooting started. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The humans had hidden themselves so well that the Torvan could not find targets to shoot back at. I ordered my soldiers to form a defensive circle. We tried to hold our position. We called for reinforcements, but help was too far away. One by one, my soldiers fell, shot by enemies they could not see. Kethrol took a breath. His mechanical arms twitched slightly, responding to the stress his body still remembered. When I woke up, I was in chains. He had been hit by 3 rounds. 2 in the chest, 1 in the leg. His armor had stopped the worst of the damage, but he was bleeding badly. The humans had dragged him from the wreckage and taken him. Prisoner. I expected to die. Slowly. Painfully. Our intelligence briefings had told us what humans did to captured. Enemies. Torture. Degradation. Experiments. We had seen recordings. We had heard stories. I prepared myself for the worst. The alchemist leaned forward. What happened? Kethrol was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost confused. A human came to see me. A female, young. She wore the markings of a medical officer. She looked at my wounds and made a face like she was worried. Then she started treating them. The human medic had worked for hours. She cleaned his injuries. She removed the projectiles from his flesh. She sealed the wounds with some kind of medical adhesive. She gave him medicine for the pain. I asked her why, Kethrol said. I asked her why she was helping me. I was the enemy. I had come to conquer her world. I had killed her people. Why would she save my life? The medic had looked at him with those strange human eyes. Round eyes with colored circles in the center. Soft eyes. Kind eyes. She had smiled at him. She said, because you are wounded. Because you need help. Because that is what we do. Kethrol still did not understand it. Even now, 47 years later, he could not make sense of those words. The Torvan did not treat enemies with kindness. Why would they? Enemies were threats to be eliminated. That was logical. That was sensible. I was taken to a prisoner camp, he continued. It was not what I expected. We had food. We had clean water. We had beds to sleep in. The guards did not beat us or humiliate us. They simply watched us and made sure we did not escape. Other Torvan prisoners were equally confused. They gathered in small groups and whispered to each other. Was this a trick? Were the humans fattening them up for some terrible purpose? Were they going to be used in experiments? One day, a human soldier came to speak with us. A sergeant named David Chen. He was young, shorter than most humans. He had a friendly face and an easy smile. He sat down across from us like we were old friends meeting for a drink. The sergeant had explained the rules of the camp. Simple rules. Reasonable rules. Do not try to escape. Do not fight with the guards. Do not cause trouble. Follow these rules, and you will be treated well. Break them, and there will be consequences. I asked him why we were not being tortured. I asked him why they were not extracting information from us. I asked him why they were treating us with respect. Chun had laughed. Not a cruel laugh. A genuine laugh, like Kethril had said something funny. He said, "That is not how we do things. You are a soldier. You deserve respect. You were doing your job. We were doing ours. The war does not make us monsters." Kethril fell silent. The archivist waited. That broke me. The old veteran finally said, "Not the battles. Not the explosions. Not the friends I watched die. That kindness broke me in a way that violence never could." He looked at his mechanical arms. I had spent over a year fighting these creatures. I had watched them commit acts of terrible brutality. I had seen them laugh as they killed my soldiers. I had seen them booby-trap their own dead and poison our water supplies. I thought I understood what they were. I thought they were savages, monsters, beasts wearing civilized clothing. His voice cracked. But they were not. They were just people. People who could be gentle or violent depending on the situation. People who could show mercy to prisoners while fighting to the death against armies. People who could smile and joke and share their food with the enemy one day, then tear that same enemy apart the next. The realization had been terrifying. More terrifying than any battle. If they had been pure evil, I could have understood them. Evil is simple. Evil is predictable. But they were not evil. They were something far more complicated. They were beings who chose their actions moment by moment, based on circumstances I could not predict. Sergeant Chun had visited Kethril several more times during his captivity. They had talked, really talked, about their homes, their families, their hopes, their fears. Chun had a wife and a young daughter back on Earth. He missed them. He wanted the war to end so he could go home. He was not my enemy, Kethril said. He was just a person who happened to be on the other side of a war. A person who would kill me without hesitation if I tried to harm his people, but who would also share his last meal with me if I was hungry. The old veteran looked at the archivist with haunted eyes. That is the truth about humans that no one wants to accept. They are not special because they are cruel. They are special because they can be anything. Kind or vicious. Merciful or merciless. Gentle or terrifying. They contain all possibilities within themselves, and they choose which one to show the world based on how you treat them. He clicked his mandibles slowly. We chose to invade their homes. We chose to threaten their families. We chose to try and conquer them. And so they showed us the face of war. But when the war ended, when we were no longer a threat, they showed us a different face. The face of mercy. The face of friendship. Kethril leaned back in his chair. I have spent 47 years trying to decide which face is the real one. I still do not know. Perhaps they both are. Perhaps that is what makes them human. The sun had fully set by the time Kethril finished speaking. The memorial center's lights had come on, casting soft shadows across the interview room. The archivist had filled 3 recording devices with his words. 3 devices full of memories and pain and lessons learned too late. Outside the window, the capital city sparkled with lights. Millions of Torvan going about their lives, working, eating, raising their children. Most of them had no idea what their grandparents' generation had faced. Most of them did not want to know. The Treaty of Luna was signed 47 years ago, Kethril said. I was there, you know? I was one of the military advisors present at the ceremony. I watched our leaders shake hands with the human delegation. I watched them smile and exchange gifts and talk about a bright future of cooperation and trade. He made a sound that might have been a laugh in another lifetime. The humans brought gifts for everyone. Food from Earth, works of art, musical recordings. They were so friendly, so warm, so eager to put the war behind us and move forward. I remember thinking how strange it was. How could they forgive us so easily? We had invaded their worlds. We had killed their people. We had tried to destroy their way of life. The archivist nodded. Perhaps they simply wanted peace. Yes, Catherall agreed. They did. But that is not the whole truth. The whole truth is more complicated. The whole truth is that humans are practical creatures. They understood that revenge would only lead to more war. They understood that friendship would bring more benefits than hatred. They understood that the hegemony could be a valuable ally instead of a defeated enemy. He clicked his mandibles. They forgave us because it was useful to forgive us. They became our friends because it was profitable to be our friends. And they are sincere in that friendship. That is what makes it so unsettling. They genuinely like us now. They genuinely want good relations. The war is ancient history to them. They have moved on. The old veteran looked toward the doorway where the human diplomat had passed hours earlier. But I have not moved on. I cannot. Every time I see a human, I remember what they are capable of. Every time I hear human laughter, I remember how that laughter sounded coming from ambush positions while my soldiers died. Every time I see a human smile, I wonder what lies behind it. He turned back to the alchemist. Young Torvald today do not understand. They think I am a foolish old soldier living in the past. They tell me that humans are wonderful, friendly, funny, creative. Some of our young people even mate with humans now. They form families. They raise hybrid children. They see no reason to fear a species that has been our ally for nearly 5 decades. His voice grew quiet. I did not tell them they are wrong. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps the war really is ancient history. Perhaps humans truly have no interest in harming us anymore. Perhaps the friendship is real and lasting and permanent. He paused. But I also do not tell them they are right. Because I remember New Saskatchewan. I remember Millbrook Valley. I remember Elena Kowalski and her grain harvester. I remember David Chun and his easy smile and his daughter waiting for him back on Earth. I remember both faces of humanity. The violence and the kindness. The terror and the mercy. The archivist finally asked the question she had been holding back all day. Do you think they will ever turn on us again? Do you think there will be another war? Catherall considered the question carefully. It was the question that haunted him every night. The question that kept him awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, wondering. I do not know, he admitted. I honestly do not know. The humans have a saying that I think about often. They say, speak softly and carry a big stick. The archivist frowned. What does that mean? I used to think it meant they were deceptive, that they hid their strength behind gentle words, that they pretended to be weak while secretly being strong. But I was wrong. That is not what it means at all. He leaned forward. It means they do not need to threaten. It means they do not need to boast or intimidate or prove their power. Everyone already knows what they are capable of. Everyone already knows what happens when you push them too far. So they can afford to be polite. They can afford to be kind. They can afford to speak softly because everyone knows about the big stick. Catherall straightened in his chair. That is what frightens me most. Not what they did to us during the war. What frightens me is what they chose not to do. They could have destroyed us. Completely. Utterly. They had the will and the capability. After everything we did to them, they would have been justified in seeking revenge. But they did not. They chose mercy. They chose friendship. They chose to let us live. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And every single day, they make that choice again. Every single day, they choose not to use the big stick. Every single day, they decide to be our friends instead of our conquerors. And I am grateful for that choice. Truly grateful. But I also know that it is a choice, which means it could change. The archivist turned off her recording device. The interview was over, but she sat quietly for a moment, processing everything she had heard. Thank you for sharing your memories, Shield Captain. The archive is honored to preserve them. Kethril nodded slowly. Make sure the young ones read these records. Make sure they understand. Not so they will fear humans. Fear is not useful. But so they will respect them. So they will never forget what humanity is capable of, both good and bad. So they will never make the same mistake we made. He stood, his old joints creaking, his mechanical arms whirring softly. The humans are our friends now. I believe that. I truly do. But I also believe that friendship exists because we have earned it. Because we stopped trying to conquer them. Because we learned to treat them as equals. If we ever forget that lesson, if we ever start to think of them as prey again, we will learn it once more. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. And the second lesson will be our last. The old veteran stepped out into the corridor. Through a nearby window, he could see the lights of the city. Somewhere out there, humans and Torvan were sharing meals together, making business deals, telling jokes, falling in love, building a future together. It was beautiful. It was hopeful. It was everything the war had never been. Kethril allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps the young ones were right. Perhaps peace really was permanent. Perhaps humanity truly had put the past behind them. But as he walked home through the quiet streets, he kept one hand near his weapon. Just in case, some memories never fade. Some lessons stay learned forever, and the humans had taught him very, very well.